Did you do the Monday class that Ward covered?
I did. It was good. It was a good Dharma talk.
Uh,
Yeah, Willa did a really good job.
So we're starting. We started live. Welcome, Jason Murphy, Rebel Dharma, Wednesday night. Glad you guys are here. Those of you on Zoom, online, those of you in the room. People be popping in. So I've been, we've kind of been free floating a little bit, we've been talking about karma the last few weeks, and some meditation. And I've been I started talking about I was talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and then talking about the 4 noble truths. And I started talking about 4 noble truths, but then we got kind of, maybe, I don't know, you could say sidetracked into some talking about karma and rebirth, which I think has been really great. I've enjoyed the conversation and teaching, but I do want to try to focus a little bit today. So I'll maybe not open so much into questions and try to kind of get some information out, and then we'll open up towards the end of the session more for questions. So this will be a kind of a lecture today, a bit, as much as I can really just do a lecture, But let's go ahead and sit. Let's sit for some time. Usually we sit 25-30 minutes, finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, where you could feel relaxed and alert, settling in. Just taking a few moments and just checking in with the body, checking in with the mind. What's happening here? How are you feeling? Even do a bit of a mental check-in of the day. Just taking a few breaths. Seeing what's left over from your day. And then if you can, just allowing whatever's happened prior. Just be there. Just be in the past. Seeing if you can, inhabit this moment. This ever-changing present time experience. Really, so much of the practice is aimed at just being with what is. And the mind wants to remember the past or jump to the future, as if that will help us in some way. But it's really just habit. So we can kind of train the mind. Whenever past or future thoughts arise, just intervening with a simple not now. And then back to breath, body, here. And of course, we do this without judgment or criticism, knowing that that's just what the mind does: thinks, plans, remembers. We don't have to obey the habitual mind. Just this breath, this sitting, breathing body. Knowing that the attention may wander off. It's time and time again, just aiming the attention back with a sense of friendliness or kindness. Here, this breath, this sitting, breathing body.
It's
Thoughts come and go. Sounds, sensations. It's all just happening here. This moment. This being alive. The birth, the life, and the death of this breath. One breath at a time. if we can drop below the stories, just be with the experience of each sense door, receiving each moment. Perhaps practicing anytime a thought arises, or a story, or some question, to just let it go. Let it float away. Not now. Again and again. Just recognizing what's happening here. This sitting, breathing body. again and again, seeing what arises. Recognizing future or past. And then just aiming that attention back here. This sitting, breathing body. Thank you for sitting with me. So I'm going to kind of just jump right in, and then we'll open up for some questions and discussion later. So, it's well kind of documented that the first teaching after the Buddha's enlightenment is, the Four Noble Truths. I don't know if that's totally accurate from what I can understand. I think it's all encapsulated in the Four Noble Truths. But after the Buddha's kind of struggle, and let's just think about the Buddha's story. So this prince who set out, departed from his known way of being, his kind of habitual life, privileged. And so there was a departure from what was known. And then there was a struggle, and this struggle, was over several years. Struggle, which kind of culminated in what we call the Battle of Mara, where basically he's kind of doing battle with these kind of aspects of all of our minds. What are known as the hindrances, or the kilesas, so greed, hatred, and delusion, manifested in various ways. Most of this was done through meditation, and he joined this ascetic group, and they were intentionally kind of trying to find their way out of attachment to the body and beautification and the fixation that we all seem to have with life, and kind of staying alive, right? One of our kind of core drives. And kind of part of that was really part of that struggle was to really be brought to, or brought himself to, the brink of death. And then, he recognized and he had support of these other 5 kind of sadhus, or what are called ascetics. And so through the struggle, he kind of recognized the teaching of what is now called the middle way. So the path, this is often just considered the path of the middle way. The middle way between the kind of, extremes. And this isn't just, from the time of the Buddha, that we're all, I think there's so many extremes. There's so much kind of dualistic, black and white, good, bad, extreme, hedonism and extreme kind of asceticism was what the Buddha would recognize as the kind of extremes that he was looking at, kind of addressing. And he, recognized, or he remembered that, when he was young, he found this peace and ease, which kind of by accident, fell into a kind of a deep meditative state, like 8, 9 years old. And he kind of, that came up, that he remembered that came up, this, oh, there was this time some time ago while he was in the struggle. And it was quite profound for him. And so the struggle was, seeking, was the struggle with the mind, the struggle with the ego, the struggle with the body. And then there was an awakening. And the awakening began with this kind of rediscovering of what he later called the razor's edge, or the middle way. So, this seems to be actually his first teaching. The understanding that one must find balance from the extremes of religious life, right? The awakened one talked of the razor's edge, the extreme hedonism, extreme pleasure seeking, kind of without end. And this is what we call, addiction, right? Or greed, wanting. Stevens comes out in kind of, I think, modern day, and I think at the time too, needing to be right, or sometimes the extreme of kind of arrogance or conceit, or the other side, spiritual superiority. I found this to be such a turnoff when I was kind of young in my meditative practice, and I would see these kind of, very guru-like figures, and often doing what I'm doing now, sitting up in front of, a group of people on maybe an elevated seat, or, but it wasn't just the physicality of it. It was also an air of the one who knows. And from what I understand, the Buddha kind of never came across that way. And there was times where the Buddha would be kind of baited into a debate or something, and he would hold fast to his knowing of the truth, but not in a really a demeaning way, or a self-righteous way, because that very much comes off as egotistical. And so what is enlightenment but the vanquishing of the ego? Mara being the ego. So there's, this kind of the extreme of all of these things, this kind of spiritual superiority or arrogance or conceit all comes out in really attachment. And this is, what the Buddha called attachment to view. This is my view, the way I see things. Convince me otherwise. Let's get in an argument about it, on Twitter, right? Or Facebook, or, whatever online kind of vehicle that we use now. I think Reddit is also like a thing where people are getting into it with each other. I don't know much about it. Or disconnect completely, right? Go off the grid, the other extreme, which there's been a lot of that. I'm going off the grid, completely disconnect from society. At the time of the Buddha, it was, living in a cave, or, retreating to the forest and becoming a hermit, I'm just gonna practice and live off the land, which there's nothing really wrong with that. But if it's a way to disconnect or to avoid, this is what the Buddha saw as problematic. It's another kind of form of escape. Hedonism, or pleasure seeking, addiction, escape. Completely kind of removing, and this even happens, I see it a lot actually, where people remove themselves from their felt sense or their emotional sense, and they just live in their minds. They just live in their intellectual understanding. I can understand the rationality of the world, but not the emotionality of the world or ourselves. So this is also what I think the Buddha was pointing to in the middle way. This sometimes looks like spiritual bypassing, right? Or avoiding life's problems by immersing oneself in practice. So like the Buddha did with the 5 ascetics. So he had this kind of, this deep concentration, or this, having everything I wanted and all the pleasure and all the money and all the food and all the everything didn't work. What if I remove it all? Sometimes, we call this FTW here, right? Fuck the world. I'm out. There's a lot of people that do that. So the middle way, is the path of balance. It's spelled out in the Eightfold Path. It's very relevant today, like in terms of consumption of products or technology or drugs versus kind of complete separation from society, political extremism versus kind of doing nothing to create change, Yeah. Well, so great question. The Buddha and the Sangha, so his after, so this is after he, kind of what I'm talking about is kind of the process in which he became a teacher. But just to answer your question, the Buddha would live. He was homeless, yes, wandered from village to village, would stay in the forest, or if somebody offered him, often people would offer him, and his monks, barn, or sometimes a palace, so they would stay wherever they needed to stay. But they were engaged with communities, and actually dependent. This is part of the asceticism, and what in Thailand they call bindabat, or going for alms. So they were completely dependent on villages and all kinds of people, and the farmer to the king on food, on sustenance, right? And in exchange would offer teachings to those who wanted. So very much engaged, not totally removed, not living off the grid, not living out in the forest. Now, the lineage that I'm a part of, known as the Thai forest tradition, And sometimes there's also a Burmese forest tradition, and there's a Sri Lankan forest tradition. Part of the work that these groups do is they actually take time and do an ascetic practice where they go live in a cave for like a month or live in the forest kind of on their own as an isolated practice. This is what we do when we go on retreat. We're retreating to, like a very simple life, right? But still dependent on others. And so not completely removed. Yeah. So that's the context there and how that's slightly different. Maybe I'll say a little bit more about that later. But the Buddha wanted people to understand and awaken in his first teaching, right? And he thought, okay, if I talk about suffering, everybody can pretty much recognize suffering. But it's not really like from a marketing point of view, starting with, okay, there's fucking suffering here, and we're all suffering, right? That's not a good hook. But is it? Or is it? Because we can all relate to it, right? So this is what the Buddha said about suffering. The Buddha acknowledged that there is an inherent problem or dis-ease in this realm, being the human realm. The Buddha acknowledged that not all life is suffering, but that there is inherent suffering in the world, in this realm of existence. And he was specific in saying birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair is suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. To obtain what one doesn't want is suffering. And then, so in short, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. The 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. So right in that moment, he's talking about that when we cling to things or people or experiences or what we don't have or what we do have that we don't want, we're causing suffering for ourselves. And then he went on to say, what are the 5 aggregates? So I'll go over them. It's a much bigger topic, but I'll just go because it's part of this first noble truth, right? So what are the 5 aggregates? So the 5 aggregates of clinging are material form, meaning our physical body, our sense faculties, our material objects, and that which is found in the external world. All right. What else do we cling to? So we all pretty much can agree. We cling to this body. We want it to be whatever we want it to be. And we suffer sometimes about it. And sometimes most people, I think, suffer about whatever body image. And if I was bigger or smaller or healthier or taller or, whatever, there's some suffering associated with that. And then sense faculties, particularly pleasant sense faculties, right? We can get attached, cling to those. Material objects, the things that we think are going to make us happy. And then feelings. So the affective feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is something we cling to. Or repel. Repel that which is unpleasant. But this is part of the aggregates, the 5 aggregates that basically create suffering. Perception. Discerning the qualities of things, including recognition and memory. So this is what's meant by perception. And then mental formations, all wholesome and unwholesome mental factors, such as compassion, volition, and then this attachment to mental formation. Sometimes I call it mental fabrication. So the stories that we create, in that which is, wholesome and unwholesome. Sometimes people get addicted to their negative narrative. I am a bad person. I am whatever. Sometimes I call this negative core beliefs that get either instilled or, I was just hearing a story the other day. A young child, say 6 years old, their parents divorce, and the child is maybe too young, that the parents think, for the parents to think that they should talk to the child about it. And it just happens, and they just separate, and it's just happening. The child adopts a negative core belief, and I see this all the time, of this is my fault. I did this. No one explained to the child, this is not your fault. You didn't cause this. And even sometimes that has happened. I have seen that happen. And there's still it's not my fault, but there's something that I did. I'm not good enough somehow. Like I wasn't a good enough kid or a good enough son or daughter or whatever. And so, there's still a deficiency that gets kind of adopted. That's what we call a negative core belief. And then it continues to kind of manifest. So this is one of the things we're talking about when we talk about mental formations, these mental formations. And then over time, it gets buried, and we kind of forget that even happened, that kind of core belief was instilled or created. The instilling part is you're a bad kid, or even the opposite, getting rewarded for being good. Oh, you're so good. You help your mom clean up the kitchen. Oh, you're so good. But then if you're not being super helpful and walking through the world and this, then what happens? People create these neuroses around identifying as being the good one. And that's how you get that kind of attention, right? So these are, mental formations that are all that in psychology we're calling negative core beliefs. I have to be always the good one, or else no one will love me. That's an innocent kind of negative core belief that wreaks havoc, I think, in our society, right? So what I'm trying to do is kind of bring these aggregates to life in how they manifest for us. And then how, when we cling to these ideas, even these mental formations of what we think right or wrong is, or good or bad is, then that can cause suffering for ourselves. So the fifth aggregate in this list is consciousness. There's a lot of kind of stuff about consciousness, and there's just a few very simple descriptions. Consciousness: awareness through contact between object and its corresponding organ. So one would say sound, ear consciousness. When you hear a sound, there is ear consciousness, the hearing and the knowing of what is being heard, right? There's also some perception mixed in there, because these things are not independent. They are aggregates of what makes us us. So another view of consciousness is just the reality of here and now. Where is sound heard? But in the here and now. So consciousness is, I've talked about it, the flame-like process that's constantly changing. mind moments is the way sometimes it's described. And what is mind? You know, in Buddhism, it's called chitta, which, you know, also, you know, can be described as consciousness. Right? This is the in this connection, you know, meaning this kind of state of mind or units in the stream of mind, momentary duration, right? Which mental objects pop out of. So just in meditation, we were just working in meditation, fairly quiet, a little bit of instruction. I was primarily saying, you know, here, now, thoughts are going to come, mental formations are going to come. We're not trying to stop that from happening. We're trying to see it for what it is. Just mental formations. Just mind objects. Just like the breath is a meditative object. Constantly changing, never the same, and can be focused on in its changing process. Right. Same thing with the mind. You can just see it for what it is. You know. So this is the first noble truth from the Buddhist perspective. But there is suffering in this world, and so much of the suffering is about clinging, and so much of that clinging is about recognizing what we're clinging to. And all of these, you know, things basically are what we get confused of as a self. Mental formation, this body, feelings. I am my feelings. Do you believe that? I think we do from time to time, you know? I still get caught in that sometimes. You know, this is a feeling and I'm identified with it. Anything that we're identifying with, right? Our perceptions, you know, including our, not only our like kind of past perceptions, but our perception of the way we view ourselves or the way we view society. We get real identified with that. We cling to that. Yeah, this is what I believe. I believe that, you know, all people should be free. No one should be, you know, I don't know. Everyone should be wealthy. Everyone should be, you know, have free healthcare. There we go. That's something. Like this is something I have a perception about, I have a view about, I'm identified with. Sometimes I'll even choose a political party to identify with, you know, and then anyone that's not in that political party is in the other side. And then there's this suffering that comes from that. Sure, we're all very familiar. Just think about masks versus no masks. Vaccine versus no vaccine, right? We can get so caught in that. We have been. I even have conversations with people and they say like, yeah, I know, I get what you're saying, but I'm right. You know, we do need to wear masks and we do need to be vaccinated and we do, you know, whatever it is, or, you know, we do need, you know, I could just go to the other side, you know, we do need to, you know, stop abortion, and people do need to believe in life and support life. You know, there's all kinds of, you know, ways that we can kind of choose a side, stick to a view. And the Buddha is saying, yeah, this happens and this is suffering. Just plain and simple. It's suffering. Right or wrong, suffering. So the second noble truth, suffering is caused by selfish craving, selfish and self-centered craving. So again, that ego identification, meaning kind of identifying with any part of desire and clinging to having that thing or that state being anything other than it is. So this identification with desire. I was thinking the other day, like when somebody is jealous, and people have experienced jealousy. You guys experience jealousy? Jealousy, it's not talked about much in Buddhism, but jealousy is desire that's unmet. I have some kind of desire that either I feel like I can't meet myself, or it hasn't been met for me, and I see it in others, and I become jealous. And that's, I think, just so interesting. Envy has a very similar kind of energy. So just to continue, and then I depending, we have a little bit of time. I'll open up for questions, but then I kind of wanted to focus on the second noble truth, but I might just focus on that next week. The third noble truth, right? Selfish and self-centered craving can be destroyed, can be uprooted, can be dismantled. So the cause of our suffering, we can find release from this clinging. This is what the Buddha is saying. This is what the Buddha's kind of awakened state. This is what the Buddha awakened to, the release. Selfish and self-centered craving can be destroyed, meaning one can come to an end of suffering. Now, this is an interesting thing, because I think everyone in this room and everyone online maybe has found relief from suffering at some point. So this statement kind of found the end, or come to the end of suffering. That means not creating new suffering. Because I have had moments where I've been like, oh, I'm not suffering right now. And then very acutely becoming aware, oh, I'm suffering right now. That happened. It came to an end, but then it started up again, And this is also, connected to this idea of rebirth a little bit. What are we reborn into? New suffering. And sometimes I think in meditation, people get locked in the short version of it, which is, like I can have a meditative experience, or even like a meditative retreat. Now, I've never been on a meditative retreat where people don't experience some suffering, but then coming to some release, some end, some setting down, some letting go. And then the bell rings, or somebody walks into your walking path, or you get off the retreat, or you check your email, and then reborn into clinging, craving, selfish, self-centered. And it's because it's so, and this is one of the things about the Buddhist teaching that I, you'll hear me talk about it all the time. You'll hear Noah talk about it. That the Buddha was like not convinced that people were going to get it. He was like, this is so difficult. It goes against the stream, against our mental habits, our conditionality. And, I feel like what we're trying to do here is, just see whenever we can. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm getting caught. Oh, I just got caught. I just got caught in selfish, self-centered craving. I just got caught in, ego clinging to an idea. I just got caught. And then release, And I think this is something we can do every day. We can do it every day. Recognizing this is what mindfulness is helping us to do. This is what meditation is helping us to do. Recognizing, oh, I'm caught right now in a story, or in a idealization of the way I think things should be versus reality. okay, now that I recognize that I'm caught, can I relax and release? Right. And the sooner that we're able to do that, the less suffering we're actually carrying forward. That's pretty hopeful, actually, for me. I think it's a pretty hopeful way. All right, so the fourth noble truth, that suffering can be destroyed, can be uprooted, can be dismantled by the following eightfold path. So then it's kind of like the way I often talk about it is first noble truth, ailment. There is suffering in this world. Suffering looks like this. Second noble truth, diagnosis. The cause of the ailment is selfish, self-centered, craving, clinging, right? The third noble truth is the prognosis. The prognosis is good. There's a way out, right? We can heal. Fourth noble truth, prescription. The prescription is follow the eightfold path. What is the eightfold path? Kind of breaks down into three main points, right? They're called Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Sila, ethical integrity, precepts, living in a way where we're not actively creating suffering for ourselves. Right? One of the things that I just love about the Buddhist teachings is this teaching around not creating suffering. It has to do with the that statement of against the stream. That ultimately, when the Buddha was kind of contemplating, so later what was happening is he was telling his monks later on, he was telling, this is what happened, this is how I got here, this is how, and he was like, I recognize that in every generation there will be few with less dust in their eyes that will be able to see the truth, that will be able to kind of recognize this middle path, the razor's edge of in between the extremisms, the extremist views, the dualistic views. There's a lot of dualism in Buddhism. There's a lot of looking at the extremes, the wholesome, the unwholesome, the skillful, the unskillful, clinging, non-clinging. But it's all really pointing to the space in between those two extremes, the middle way, the path leading to the middle way, the eightfold path. So within the Sila, within the kind of ethical integrity, sometimes it's called the morality group, right speech, right? Abstaining from falsehood, slander, harsh speech, useless words, right action, abstaining from drugs and alcohol, from killing, from stealing, from sexual misconduct, and then right livelihood, which isn't really added into the precepts, but part of the eightfold path, which is avoiding all means of livelihood that involves harm or exploitation of others. So that's kind of considered preparation, right? That before one can really find relief from the past suffering that's still manifesting, call it karma, call it what you will, that's still manifesting, usually mentally, right? We have to stop creating new negative karma. And how do we do that? Well, just by not being an asshole, right? And it's kind of baseline. Following the 5 basic precepts, right, of non-harming. Then the Buddha gave the instruction to then cultivate the mind. First, stop being an asshole. Right? That's hard. That's hard to do. You know, has been for me, has been for a lot of people. Partially because we get pulled into the mental formations, to these reactive tendencies, to these negative core beliefs, to these habits of mind, you know, and then it starts the process again and again and again. And, you know, I actually feel like if you never meditate in your life and you just like are active in trying not to be an asshole, like that's great. That's a great service, not only to yourself, but to others, because then we're just working on, okay, I'm trying to just not create or cultivate more suffering for myself. Like there's so much to deal with, you know. What happens in this country, and I think, well, I mean, other like India and, you know, Southeast Asia, they really do kind of try to put these precepts first, you know, like act in a kind and generous way, being of service. And we do that here to some degree. But I think for convert Buddhists, that's us, we're converts. I think we are, all of us. I don't know. But we usually put meditation first because we see that as the relief. You know, we've been kind of sold that, which is, you know, not wrong. But I don't know if you experienced this, but when I first started meditating, like I had a little bit of relief, just like, oh, wow, I don't have to obey my mind and I can just focus on my breath and not just let my mind run the show all the time with all of its bad advice, you know, or all of its harsh self-talk. And I got a little bit of relief. But then not very long after that, I had all of the kind of ways that I had been an asshole or, you know, been harmful and to myself, to others, just came up for years. It still comes up, but much less than it used to. Because I like to think that I try to not create more karma for myself, negative karma. But I fail at that all the time, you know. So what is samadhi? What does a concentration group look like? Right effort. So training the mind to avoid unwholesome mental states and to develop wholesome mental states. Right? So training the mind to avoid getting caught in the negative self-talk, getting caught in the ways of kind of spilling out on each other. So last night I was driving from Northern California down here, and I was in my friend's big truck, and we're on a freeway, and I ride a motorcycle. This motorcycle comes like splitting lanes, and there wasn't a lot of room, and somehow felt like I had done something wrong. And then turned around and like yelled at me and like flipped me off. Actually, it was kind of interesting because I was afraid that he was going to hit the car in front of, because he was like so angry and focused on me. Like I mean, maybe I swerved or something. I don't know. It was a big truck. And I just remember thinking, gosh, I hope he doesn't crash and like turn around and look. Like I did. I had a twinge of an urge to flip him off back. Like I didn't do anything. What are you doing? Like, why focus on what you're doing? You know, don't focus on what I'm doing. But I didn't actually. And I thought to myself, oh, like maybe I didn't create suffering in that moment for myself. I mean, he was clearly suffering, you know. And then I had 3 other thoughts. And one was like, get a bigger bike, get a louder pipe, you know. Don't ride like an idiot. But I didn't say anything. I didn't, you know, anyway. I don't know why. I just thought of that. Okay, right effort. Training the mind to avoid the unwholesome mental states and to develop wholesome states. So the wholesome states, the wholesome mental states, and really in that moment was, you know, may you be safe. May you be at ease, you know. And then also recognizing, and this is something that I think we can also work on every day, recognizing, oh, wow, that person is suffering, and I don't need to accept their suffering. I don't need to allow it into my life, into my sphere, And it's not avoiding it, but it's just recognizing, like, oh, I don't need to accept other people's suffering. Because what happens when someone's suffering is that they spill out onto their loved ones, onto their family, onto their work, onto their friends, onto the internet, You ever see those? I was talking about this not that long ago. It's mostly men in cars posting on Instagram, like whatever they have to say to the world. They're in their car and they're like talking to about what they have to say, what their strong opinions are. And you don't have to accept it. You can just, you don't have to respond. But that's like a spilling out, This is what I got to say about the world, and, what's the matter with it? So wise effort. Wise mindfulness, developing the power of attentiveness and awareness in regard to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? Body, feeling, mind, mental phenomena. So this is, what we're developing here. We're developing this power of attentiveness and awareness. It's the primary focus of this type of liberating practice. Because if we don't have mindfulness, we don't actually see the processes that are happening in our minds. And this is where sometimes people focus on. So the next thing is concentration. So concentration, which when I first learned to meditate, was primarily what I learned: concentration, meditation, breath, focusing, aiming tension, one-pointed awareness. And I found some relief. And this is actually what happened to the Buddha too, that the Buddha, went into some deep concentrative states, and his first teacher was a concentration teacher, samadhi teacher. And this is it's a form of avoidance, so the Buddha warned against just doing concentration practice, because it's separating yourself from what's actually happening here. We can't really find liberation if we're just, nullifying all of our thoughts and feelings. Right? And you can do it. Concentration is awesome for that. There's actually there's like a whole list of like the jhanas. Jhanas are considered deep concentrated states where these kind of hallucinogenic experiences and what's called samatha. Samatha is like well-being, kind of blissful experiences where we're kind of dissociated. We're literally dissociated from what's going on around us. And some people are really into that. And there's good reason, because it has that effect. But then they come out of that meditative state and nothing has changed. Where concentration and mindfulness together, which is what we call insight. And this is, so this is where the Buddha here is talking about effort, mindfulness, and concentration together is what is creating liberation, the ability to see and to know. And this is the third basket found in the Eightfold Path. Wisdom, the wisdom group, Panya. And the wisdom group is understanding, so knowledge of the true nature of life, understanding the Four Noble Truths. So not just being able to read them, but understanding, standing under the practice of the Four Noble Truths and the true nature of life. And then wise thought free from sensuality, ill will, and aggression. So sensuality meaning this kind of greed, wanting, addictive attachment. free from ill will in all of its forms, resentment, anger, forms of hatred, bigotry, racism, free from ill will. Can you imagine if there just was no ill will? What a different planet this would be. No ill will. Some kind of Pleasantville or something. Everyone just got along. I think it would totally, this whole peace on earth would probably happen. Yeah. All right, so we're out of time, but that's kind of what I have for you today. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the middle path to the end of suffering. So thoughts, questions. We only have a minute or two. Yeah, Jess.
Just a quick thought.
Mhm.
And you may have explained this a little bit when this gentleman asked the question, but we say we don't want to escape,
Mm-hmm.
but aren't monks escaping by living the way that they do, avoiding the world to prevent suffering?
Great question. So, our monks, again, this is what's talked about as the middle path. So we're far left of middle, right? Fully engaged, jobs, families, wanting things, buying things, having things, all of that kind of first aggregate, right? The kind of material world, fully engaged in consumption, the monastic kind of order, we'll just say, is middle. So they're not completely disengaged, but they have this is the commitment that in order to free themselves from suffering, they have removed themselves from the kind of consumerist game, and that's a choice. And many monks will say, the reason why they've done that is because they recognize that it's extremely hard, extremely difficult to find the peace and ease that we're talking about without some level of renunciation, right? Yeah. So that's really, the monastics, the monks and nuns live in the middle path, because they're not totally removed. They're still engaging to some degree, but have let go of what's called the householder life, which is what we live. We live a householder life. Yeah.
Was Buddha in the middle path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he wasn't living in a cave.
Right. Because he wasn't in a cave, because he was engaging every day with communities, because he lived a life of service, basically, to people, to anyone, and anyone could join him. And he was dealing, and they were together too. They were in their own group, that were together. And so he had to deal with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of conflicts, and he was actually also very engaged socially. He was actively trying to stop wars all the time. So we'll pick up from there next week. I think I'll focus on the second noble truth. And just to thank you, let's Let me just kind of see. There's a couple things here. Yeah, mostly the links. You can donate to Against the Stream, and you can also donate to me if you'd like and Venmo, Jason Murphy, No BS Buddhist. There's also a bowl here, and it has a little QR code, and there's some links there. Thank you for your time and attention, and let's just dedicate any goodness that comes from our practice together. May this goodness be dedicated to the freedom from suffering for all beings. May we all be free. Thank you very much.